Our next guest wants to remind us about the power of reading. Historian Kenneth C. says he believes books are a weapon in the war of ideas. In his new book, The World in Books, 52 works of great short nonfiction, Davis writes, we need to fight for the right to read what we want, and we need to read more books. Between the pages, he introduces us to influential works of nonfiction from acclaimed authors like Frederick Douglass, Joan Didion, and Elie Wiesel. We are so happy to have Kenneth C. with us. Welcome.
Great pleasure to be back with you. Thanks for having me.
So I love how this book is organized. You basically introduce readers to important works of nonfiction, but also give them kind of the context around it, your own hot takes. Why put this book about books together in this way?
Well, first of all, I am a reader. I've lived a life in books. I was one of those kids who had books in the bottom of my bed. I went to the library once a week. We had no bookstore in my town, Mount Vernon, New York.
No bookstore?
No bookstores then, no. But we had paperbacks and we had great libraries, school libraries and the Mount Vernon Public Library. So I was a reader before I was a writer. I didn't even dream of becoming a writer. And books were part of my life. I went on to become a bookseller, actually, and from there started to write. So books have always been part of my life and part of my passion. Most people know me for books about history, but this book combines those two passions. It's a book about books, but it's also the history, who these writers are, who they were in the times that they were writing, and what is the consequence of what they wrote 1,000 years ago or 60 years ago for our lives today.
So much learning it takes to put a book like this together, and you wear it so lightly and so casually. That's why I was asking you before we came on air whether you'd been a teacher or affiliated with a university, because you have a really light touch. And
well, I think that I've always I thought I was going to be a school teacher at one point when I was back in college, but I've used my books over the years, I hate to say it, 40 years of doing this. I've always used my books as a classroom, and I think I write the way I would speak to students in a classroom. And I've spoken to many teachers over the years who use my books in the classroom. We have to make education more accessible, more conversational. And that doesn't mean dumbing it down. It just means talking to people in a language they understood, which is what I've tried to do in my books. And in this book too, accessibility is really important with these books I've included.
Because there are books like the Quran that, we all know that we should read or understand, and you kind of break it down, here's what's important, here's my perspective, here's the historical context, and you do that with 52 books, so people can almost use this as a guide to pick and choose the books that they want to read themselves.
That's right. This is a book buffet. You can dip in anywhere you like.
All you can eat.
All you can eat. You can even start with dessert first.
Yes.
And that's part of what I've tried to do, is make all of these ideas. And these are the great thinkers, ideas, writers of all time, starting from the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Book of Genesis right down to Joan Didion and writers in our time. So I've always thought first about the consequence. What were the importance of these books and the timeliness? Do they speak to us today, and are they pleasurable to read? Because if it's just, this is the assigned reading for week 1 in the syllabus, it's dreadfully boring. These are books that are accessible, conversational, and I think speak to us today. And they speak to the issues of our time. The Nobel Prize, Peace Prize, went today to survivors of Hiroshima. Hiroshima by John Hersey is one of the books here, written many years ago, but still timely, and it speaks to the nuclear Holocaust threat. Books we are talking about the environment, obviously, and climate change. There are books in here like Under the Sea Wind by Rachel Carson or Elizabeth Kolbert that speak to these issues of climate.
It's a book that can make you seem way more worldly on dates as well, so that's helpful, not for nothing.
Helpful on Jeopardy too, or at that dinner party when the conversation is flagging, you throw out a little bit.
Did you know in the
That's
Book of
true.
Genesis?
Yeah. Book bans and fights over what should be available in libraries, that's a very real issue. But it seems to me that the thing that is a real crisis is that kids are not reading as much as they used to, and there's numbers on this. It's really declining.
There's no question about that. We were talking about the Atlantic Monthly, just talking about kids in college, elite colleges, unable to read a book. And that's part of what I'm writing about here also. There's a habit to it. It's it's like exercise, you know, if we start with a little bit, and that's what these short books are meant to do. Each of the books I've included here is 200 pages or less. You can easily read them in a week's time, and then you move on to something more difficult. It's like intensity training, you know, you do it for a short bit and you move on. We don't start training for the marathon right away. We don't read, you know, Ulysses right away by James Joyce. We start with something shorter and move on. And that's what I'm trying to do here, is get people back into the idea of reading. It is good for us. We know this scientifically. During the pandemic, I was doom scrolling like the rest of us.
Like all of us were.
Yes.
This is such a gift. Thank you so much, Kenneth.
It's my pleasure.
It gives you a taste of all these books, and you can get the books themselves to read even more if you want more. The book is called The World in Books, 52 works of great short nonfiction, and it is on sale now.